confused, if you would help me.
Well, the attachments we got for the spring list were from 2007.
I mean, and not Terry.
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
okay, I'm
Ann.
giving you a new resume.
Okay,
I printed it out.
there were 3 separate attachments, I think they were all 14 years ago. No, he was.
I
Good historical information.
Do you want me
I need an updated list too.
Do you want me to pull what he was supposed to get? No, I have it right, I updated.
You're gonna get it.
I'm gonna give him a copy.
Okay.
That way.
Because that's what I.
Yeah.
Also.
You were welcome.
I feel like I heard that.
Well, that's what, we don't need any more chairs, right? You said chairs.
They sat in these chairs, they were fine. Somebody may come in and they may want to do something.
You got one more?
Mr. Carpenter won't be here, so yes.
All right.
Yes, sorry. I just saw your name here.
And did we not send them the recommendations of the party?
Okay, so, Carthage.
I know we did.
I thought we did too, but we must not have. So I just printed out, so they got
Okay, that's
Maurice's
fine.
email, Mr. Beddoes' email, and then what we.
That's fine, that's fine.
I think this is
Well, we seen about you waiting.
Emory.
That has nothing to do with them right now. What they sent is on this right here. You'll see what Maurice has sent.
Well, let me make sure we're all singing.
So the highlighted is the current situation he was serving currently.
Right.
So, this is the right one now.
That is what he recommended. That and some other pages. Is it all stuck together for you? And this is what Mr. Beto recommended, plus his email, okay?
That's your-
You should have that also. Yes, sir. That's the Republicans you just picked up and laid down.
This one. This one is from Mr. Beddoes.
Oh, it's-
Yeah, it's just one.
And his email. And
Yeah,
his
it's just
email.
one sheet from.
Yeah, one sheet.
And then this is his email stating that he is okay with, anyone
Those that have
who's
been served.
text.
Okay, you're gonna come sit down while we.
Okay, I'll move my chair right over here.
There's a,
Oh, yeah.
might be
Let me
easier.
have that chair. Would you bring me my bottle of water?
Yes.
Do any of y'all need water?
Now, before we get started, Mr. Howard may have some corrections.
do that during
List-
public
Public
comment.
comment. All right.
Or if the chairman wants to allow it at a different time, that'll be fine.
Yeah, public comment is fine, but I do want to, yes.
Craig, you want to first one? And you want to grab water? Three up there. We didn't go get you.
You got
But
your,
there's
you have a
some
copy,
up
right?
Well, Maurice has it right now.
Okay,
Massaging.
okay. Thank you. Honestly.
Thank you. And Marie, sorry you had to be put up with all my yapping dogs. I mean,
problem. I have two of them myself.
Okay, you know the drill.
Mhm.
Well, we call this meeting to order this morning. Welcome to everyone. And just so that those from the public who don't know who we are, I'd like for you to raise your hand as I call your name. William Case.
Right here.
All right. Martin Carpenter is not here this morning. Craig Kennedy.
Here.
And Richard Ashton. And I'm Charles McKnight, I'm chairman of the board. Right now, I'd like to ask Mr. Kennedy to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, Madam Director, we will have our moments for public comment.
You sign in already.
I didn't sign.
That's okay, that is fine.
That's fine.
Okay, do I need to come up here?
Yes, come back the rest of the board, please.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Maurice Holland. I'm the chairman of the Moore County Democratic Party. And I'd like to bring a couple of oversights to, as far as my recommendation for assistance. And these are both people that have served previously. One is Susan Holbert, who served in Eureka, Western Pines, as an assistant out of precinct. And what I did on my recommendations was identify the home precinct for anyone that was serving. And so her home precinct, I believe, is West Knollwood. And Mr. Case, on yours, I've already made the correction on your printout. And then the other one is
Let's get her spelling right.
Hulbert.
And she should,
She's unaffiliated, but she's this is for an assistant.
in Eureka,
She served in Eureka, but that's out of precinct.
right?
Her precinct is West Knollwood.
Are you okay with her being out of precinct, sir?
I would be okay with her being out of precinct, but I just brought everyone back into their home
Okay.
precincts. That is a board decision. And the way I looked at the statute, it said that I could only recommend them
Right.
in their precincts. So I had to first put everybody back in their precincts in order to go forward. And then there's one other person that was an oversight is Dennis Snipes in Pine Dean, who was a Democrat. And he served in Pine Dean as an assistant previously. And he was an oversight that I just missed, considering that we're going through with all of these and making the recommendations. It's 237 action slots that you have to make recommendations for. And I caught these this morning when I was looking over everything.
Okay,
And you-
so Mr. Snipes in his home precinct at home.
He said it's one precinct. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for
What was his last name? I'm sorry.
Snipes is his last name, Dennis Floyd.
Okay.
I was about to get excited, hoping he was.
He goes into Pine Dean 5, is that, I see your note there,
Yes,
okay.
thank you.
Thank you, sir. We do appreciate it.
Did I need to sign up to say something, or can I just
You may.
mosey
Yes.
on? Good afternoon, I'm Tom Beto, I'm current chairman of the Moore County Republican Party.
Yes, sir.
I had served in the polls, and been trained by Linda before I got active in the party
So I know how well the polls are run, and what a great job Glenda does of training people, preparing them properly for doing a professional and fair job. I took her recent request simply to put forth more people who are willing to serve either in their own precincts or elsewhere, based on their general interest in making sure that we have free and fair elections. So that list that I provided is a bookend for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you both.
Thank you.
We're presently still listening. There are other public comments that need to be addressed. If not, we will now address the issue of conflict of interest. This is vital. We live in a time, and this is a political space where we're on a magnifying glass. I want to congratulate everyone from what I have read and studied from how well the elections went the last time. But I want us to recognize that we must avoid even the appearance of impropriety, because there can be no question about someone who has chosen to vote, who rightfully is voting, that anyone would question that right or might have that right taken away. And so I just want us to emphasize that oftentimes perception is reality. And sometimes we don't recognize that people may be perceiving us as being out of lockstep with what the statutes state. And so I just want to encourage us to make sure that our hands are clean. Sometimes your hearts are clean, but your hands aren't clean because you're not cognizant that that has occurred. But I want to emphasize that today, that we must avoid even the appearance of impropriety. And now I'd like to move on and ask whether or not there has been any conflict of interest. Having looked at the agenda today and reflecting from the last meeting, is there anyone or is anyone aware of any conflict of interest amongst us?
Not for me. No conflict.
No conflict. And someone make a motion that we can move beyond that there is no conflict of interest. I know we don't have to do a motion on this, but I like to have everything on the record. Can someone make a motion that there's no conflict of interest?
Well, then I'll make a motion that we proceed in light of the fact that the members have indicated unanimously they have no conflict to proceed. Second.
Is been moved and properly second. And because it was unanimous, we can just move on from here. Next, we'll move to, Madam Director, the approval of the minutes. And I'd like to know if there is any discussion or corrections that we need to make in regards to those minutes that we've received.
Mr. Chair, I'm sure that y'all are aware that I was requested to show the complete list of absentee meetings in the body of minutes rather than just the resolutions, and I have done so.
Okay.
Yes, I believe the one correction that I asked be made was made in your email to us, your last email to us, 8:40 this morning.
And you see it's done.
Thank you.
Okay, and that one request for correction by Mr. Case has been made. Were there any other concerns or corrections that needed to be made?
And that wasn't, I don't believe it was a correction, it was an inclusion.
Well, inclusion.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct
I
terminology.
didn't see it in the original draft.
All right.
That's right.
Okay,
We're on the same page.
all right. So now will someone make a motion that the minutes be approved?
Second.
It's been so moved and second. You've heard the question. You're prepared to vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Madam Director, do we have any old business that we need to discuss before we get into our new business today?
Mr. Chair, I did not indicate any old business. However, I would like to inform the board that on Monday, as advertised, we did the logic and accuracy testing for the Southern Pines primary. And at a later time, the board will be looking at and reviewing the tapes and signing off on that testing. And once we get through the primary, we will then do all the machines that will be in November. But right now, we don't have the programming for that. But as soon as we get ballots and programming, we'll be testing those machines, and all candidates will be advised again, as well as party chairs. So
Is it-
that anybody who wants to come in, they can help us with the testing.
Okay. Is everyone lucid and clear about the testing of the machines? Are there any questions? Okay, this is going to occur. It's going to be the way it's supposed to be, because this is one of those areas where some who might not have right motives are going to be focusing on, and so we have to make sure that this is right and in order. And as soon as that occurs, everyone will be made aware of that.
And then also, Mr. Chair, there is a mock election day assigned by the state in which all the counties that will be having a September election or the October election or the November elections, we all have to mock what would happen on election day by putting in the results and all that. So that's all coming forward. And that is to prove the accuracy and the fairness of the election systems in North Carolina.
Well, that's
And
it.
required by law.
And that information will be disseminated so that
Yes.
everyone will know.
Yes.
On that issue, are there any questions or comments about that before we move on? If not, we'll move on to our new business now, which is selecting precinct chief judges, and workers. Madam Director, will you take it up from there?
Yes, and I'm gonna ask Ann to help me on this. You have the statutes before you, which are a little cumbersome sometimes to read, but you have the recommendations from the Democratic Party. And as we stated earlier, you also have that we have received from the Republican Party, as well as an email memo. And there will be times that we may need to consult with Mr. Holland if it's the real wishes of the chair, where we have husbands and wives or family members that are in the same precinct, and by law, they cannot serve together, okay? So just know, and what we have done is to then go back and prepare for you a possible list of each party and each precinct that would be serving. So we'll go precinct by precinct. I hope it will go smoothly. We've had some people also, which were recommended, that have told us that they would not serve. And I've asked Ann to verify with anybody that had told us they wouldn't serve, or they didn't want to be a certain thing like the chief judge to take that responsibility, to once again go back. And so then y'all can discuss it. And then if you need to consult with Mr. Holland, I hope the chair would then let him have, some input, or let us know if that's not agreeable with him. Okay, and we're going to start with the first.
Before you start, your qualifications, you see these are how did you vet this group? How did you vet these people? One of the things that helps determine your good moral character, doing the proper things, and all that sort of stuff. I'm just curious.
Richard, there is no way. There is some legislation to do background checks on every precinct worker. And when that starts happening, we probably will have even more trouble finding them. But last year we did the buck slip in the tax notices to get volunteers. That was very successful. Then the state put out a statewide link on their website to say Democracy Heroes. We used people last year that we had no idea who they were, and God was with us. They worked out very well. And many of them enjoyed it. It gave us some new blood, some younger blood in the precinct, and they enjoyed it and want to come back, which is absolutely wonderful. And there was not one person that didn't come on board that said, I never realized how much, the best advocate we could have is the precinct worker. And once they get into it, realize what goes into it, and then they believe in the system. So there is really not at this point in time, other than if y'all knew or if we had issues with somebody, we would have to bring it to the board, okay?
This one's all aware.
Yes.
The statute is so vague,
I also think we get recommendations from seasoned poll workers over the years. They have neighbors who have expressed interest or who they would recommend, and I find that our poll workers would put their name behind somebody that they didn't think was a good fit.
And working the 15 hours on election day is not for everybody. It's hard to stay in that precinct sometimes. It's hard not to express your political opinion. And we just tell them during training, you have not lost your right to freedom of speech. But if you wish to back a candidate, then let's just say you'd not like to work this election. Doesn't mean they wouldn't work in another election. But sometimes, your next door neighbor might file for office and you may have worked for years, but you want to publicly get out and campaign for them. And they just say, we just want you to work in this election. It's no different to me than if a wife or a child or a spouse filed for office, then that person just steps back for that time. They can't serve that one election. Okay.
All right, so for Ben Salem, we have, I spoke with, I was unable to get a hold of Diane Chisholm this election, but in 2020, I had approached her about being a chief judge, and she did not want to do that last year. So I have not been able to get a hold of her this year. So what we did was Ann Spong, she stepped up last year and was the chief judge. So we put her name back there for the chief judge, and she worked out. And Diane actually was very complimentary of the work that Ann did. So I find that may be a very good fit.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like for you to consult with Mr. Conner to see if that's agreeable to him.
Actually, I spoke with Reverend Chisholm, and Reverend Chisholm is willing to do the chief judge position. And in fact, in my recommendations, I've moved Mrs. Spong back to her precinct of 7 Lakes.
And she can't work in her precinct. If she does, her husband can't work, and he can't work out of
He
precinct.
was not listed on the printout.
Do you want?
He was not listed on the printout.
He is somebody who did send to backtrack, we do send out a mailer back in March about all the previous poll workers from the last election. We send out a mailer contacting them, asking them if they would like to be reappointed. And they send back their card whether or not, yes, I'd like to be reappointed, or no, I would not. So we received back about 288 responses from the 305 that we mailed out. So his could have been one that came after. We did have a few trickle in after we sent out the list, but I do have his,
Arthur Spong is recommended as an assistant Democrat in the 7 Lakes precinct. That's her husband.
On mine.
Oh, no, yes, sir.
It's not on the one that I was handed this morning.
It's on
Just get
his
an Ann Spong.
recommendation.
This is the one you just handed out. Here.
Well.
Yeah,
Okay,
he-
sorry.
Yeah, he's an assistant.
I see that he's listed there, but I would be amenable to moving him to West End.
He has diabetes and will not move out of the Settlements precinct if he don't work, so we can, if you would prefer, we cannot work. It's the board's choice, though.
Okay, let me be clear on the recommendation. The recommendation is that Diane Chisholm was the one that was recommended, but we could not contact her.
I couldn't get a hold of her,
And,
but if
But Mr. Allen has.
yeah, that's what I'm getting to.
And she has previously refused to work as chief judge. But if she will work, that's great. Go ahead and appoint her.
Okay, so I want to make sure we have clarity. You've spoken with her and she said not only she can, she wants to.
That's correct.
And have you spoken with Ann Spone to see if she would agree to be the judge?
No, I have not.
Okay, so we need to make a decision here. This typically goes along with the recommendation of the party. However, we could not get in contact with her. He's present. And so we need to decide if that we're going to go along and we're going to make Diane Chisholm the chief judge today.
Yes, I think that's, do we do these one at a time?
We do need
I
to.
hope not.
Oh, okay. Because what I had hoped, this is an exception.
And Mr.
Then we can
Chair,
go through them and then we can, yes, ma'am.
we can defer making any appointments for Ben Salem since they won't be open in November. And we can get something in writing from Ms. Chisholm that she is willing to accept that responsibility.
Okay,
Have we notified these people that they were going to get these positions?
We've already contacted, it didn't matter that we contacted them to ask them were they willing to serve again if they were appointed. And so we have contact, but I don't know that Diane ever answered them.
So if that's the way you inquired about it, then none of them would be disappointed if they found out that they weren't appointed to be.
Oh, they will be disappointed, but that's okay.
okay,
That's good.
right. But in all these situations, we both email and call, is that right?
Yes. So basically, if I did not receive their blue card mailer back, I went ahead and emailed them at their contact email that they provided us, and then as well as calling some of our seasoned workers, like Mrs. Chisholm. I just was not able to leave a voicemail and nobody answered. And she could have been at work, but there was a number of times I tried to call.
Okay, so where we are right here, that's not until November, but tentatively, because you're going to confirm what she's already told the chair, that she will do it. Now, the other judge and the assistants, is there any objection to anything on that side?
I think everything looks good.
All right, because we don't need to go through and make a motion on everything unless there is a problem. So we're in Ben Salem. The only question is not a question. Diane Chisholm will be the chair unless she tells you something different when you confirm that with her and everything else is in place. Let's go to Cameron.
Okay. We have Kimber Reagan as the chief judge. She was recommended, and in that precinct, we had the previous chief judge no longer would like to serve as chief judge, but is willing to serve as an assistant for a judge. That's Carolyn Marsh. So I did leave her down as a judge if we need her to, but she's willing to serve in any capacity other than a chief judge. Linda Gore has been a chief judge in that precinct.
A judge, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, a judge in that precinct for a number of years, along with Amelia.
Okay, is there consensus here? And I guess as we go to each one, the only question will be, is there any discussion on any name? If so, we'll pause and we'll do that as we did in the first one. If not, we'll proceed.
Well, we can't have 3 judges, so either Linda or Carolyn won't be a judge.
Okay, so. And recommendations were made for all 3 for judge?
Carolyn said she would serve as a judge if needed. She just is no longer wanting to be the chief judge.
Right, I understand. So the
She'd
ones,
still like to serve in any capacity.
I understand. And so those that were recommended for judge were chief judge, was Ms. Reagan, and the ones that were otherwise recommended from the party were Jenkins and Marsh. Is that right?
And Gore,
And Gore.
because the Republicans said whatever we needed, and they were not aware that Ms. Marsh had not agreed to serve anymore.
Okay. So we need to discuss from that party affiliation, which of these 2, since we can only have 1, should we use?
And did you say Ms. Marsh is not available?
She does not want to be chief judge.
Chief judge.
But she'll
But she
agree.
would be either a judge or an assistant. She didn't care.
I have no recommendation. I'm fine with any of the names. So if the board thinks it's fine, I think we're good.
Okay, well, certainly because the parties pick the ones that they want, each party does, it would certainly be, I guess, most appropriate for the circumstance. If you can make a recommendation on one since Marty's not here.
Well, I'll make a recommendation of Carolyn Marsh for judge.
Okay. And then the question is, that recommendation that has been made, is that the consensus of the rest of the board?
I accept Mr. Kennedy's recommendation.
Let's just put it in a motion and we can be,
All right,
and I can conclude it that way.
all right. I'll make a motion that we appoint Carolyn Marsh as a judge in the Cameron District.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that Carolyn Marsh would be the judge in the Cameron precinct. You've heard that question. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, the same. I'm in nay. All right. Now, is there any question about the assistants in Cameron? Okay.
In other words, I guess now with Jenkins. So there's, I don't know how, if you have to do this by motion or not. Mrs. Marsh is now an assistant. We need one more assistant, right?
Ms. Marsh isn't an assistant, is she? Why'd you make her judge?
No,
I'm sorry,
she's judge. She's judge. She's judge.
So,
There's 2 judges.
but you get 2, I said that incorrectly. There's 2 judges per precinct, according
And
to
that's what's
this.
required by law.
Right. A
All
judge
right.
from each party.
So now we have Carolyn Marsh as the Republican.
Right, and there was no objection to Nellie Jenkins.
All right, well, the only reason I'm just trying to, we've gone to the trouble of making a motion on this, Mrs. Marsh.
The only reason for that is because there was some discussion that it was not confirmed if that was in fact what the party intended. There were two here, there can only be one from each party. And so for clarity, we're asking in this situation that we have a motion on it. We don't need a motion where there is no objection.
All right, well, one other question.
Yes.
On the list I actually have two judges that have been submitted to me by the Democrats, Nella Jenkins and Linda Gore.
Linda Gore's on here, but she shows unaffiliated.
She is unaffiliated.
Yeah, that's what we just talked about, is between those two.
But I don't think we made any motion on it, did we?
Yeah, it was a motion between who would be the other judge, whether it would be Carolyn Marsh or Linda Gore. That's what the motion was about. Between those two.
Okay, my mistake. Thank you.
Oh, that's all right. Look, understand this. It is better to have discussion and have clarity
Right.
than it is to have a question that's not asked. Because we're in one place and we're gonna be in one accord. You know, and there's a process that we go through to get there. So, and we're trying
It's
to.
just shown
follow
on
the-
my sheet as a Democratic
understand.
recommendation, be it for independent or otherwise. So
I understand.
that's what confused me.
I understand.
And under the law, you get to choose from those two. There's nothing other than, I mean, you're not required to name one or the other. You're to choose if they
Okay,
go
so,
to.
so the party has said, we'll take either one.
That's by
And we have to
recommendation,
decide.
yes, sir.
All right.
Is there any other discussion on this one? All right.
Have we called a question on his motion? Was there a second?
Yes, it was.
Who seconded? Richard?
Yeah, I second it.
Yes,
And did you call the question on it?
I did.
Okay, and that was unanimous?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to Carthage.
All right, for Carthage, we have,
Let's go back first to Carthage, not what we put on the list, but what was recommended by the party, which was Antoinette Kelly as chief judge.
Mhm.
She has refused, she does not want to be the chief judge. We've talked to her.
she told me that she would, unless Kim Gibson does not want to be the chief judge, she said she would prefer to stay as a judge.
You want to be heard on that?
Yes. Mr. Chair, I
Yes,
spoke with Ms. Kelly yesterday afternoon, and she said that she definitely was interested in serving as chief judge. And not only did I speak to her, but also Carthage Precinct Chair Belinda Watkins McShirley spoke with her previously, and she gave her the same answer. So that is our recommendation, is Antoinette Kelly for chief judge in the Carthage Precinct.
I will tell you, there have been issues with Antoinette. She's a wonderful worker, but she works many jobs. She left in the middle of a election day one day to go run a bus route because she's a bus driver. And she has transportation. She works probably 3 or 4 jobs, a wonderful worker. But when you leave in the middle of the day of an election day, it's unacceptable. And if you're an assistant, you can get by with it. As a chief judge, she would have been removed for cause if she had been a chief judge. But it's just fine if that's what you want to do, but you're under no legal obligation to name her. It's only your legal obligation if there's for judge only, not for chief judge. But it's up to the board what they want to do.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I respectfully disagree with that. If that was the case, then I don't understand why Ms. Kelly would be continued employment with the Board of Elections without any sort of instruction, or if there should have been some sort of written reprimand as to what went on, so that there would be a written record of any such incident, and I was not made aware of it. And I've served as first vice chair of the Moore County Democratic Party since 2013. And I'm chair, and I've been chair since December of 2018. So I will stand behind the recommendation of Antoinette Kelly for precinct chair in the Carthage precinct.
All right, we've heard the discussion, the confidence by the party chair, the concern by those who've seen this in the past. Perhaps what we need to do, we accept what the chair, what the party chair is recommending, with the caveat that if such occurrence is seen this time, that we would have to act appropriately on that. Well, what is the discussion on that?
Mr. Chair, you'll have to go through legal stuff to remove her once you're appointed.
Okay, so,
And that is just fine if that's the route they want to go. If you'd like to go.
what I will say is that in the future, any such concerns, let's make sure that we notate that, so that when we get to this point,
The board was told at the time, Mr.
Oh, they were?
Oh, absolutely. They're much aware of that. But if you do not want an assistant, you just have to consult with them. And we did talk with Antoinette about that. And as I said, she is a wonderful worker.
Right, I
I
understand.
want her in the polls. She actually speaks Spanish and has helped us out when we had people that came in that could not read English, and she's helped us there. She's a wonderful worker.
Okay, this is a situation where we're gonna need to vote to substantiate. I hear both sides, but we need to make a decision now going forward. And then too, if this does arise, that will be made known to Ms. Kelly, that, or even before beginning this year, that cannot be, that cannot occur. I mean, we've got to make sure, because we don't want to set a precedent that some people can leave and go and that others can't. I just want us to make sure that we're sure about that. Is there any further discussion on that? All right, so if Antoinette Kelly is going to be the chief judge, who then, who are the other two judges? Is Philip Steadwell agreeing to be a judge?
Steadwell has worked several cycles as an assistant. She's our recommendation as a judge, and the only recommendation for the Democratic Party.
And Mr. Chair, I believe the
Yes.
record will show that she's always worked in West Aberdeen. We asked her to come to Carthage, and she preferred at that time to work in West Aberdeen, but we certainly don't mind asking her if she'd serve as judge, but she's always been in West Aberdeen.
Okay. So we will leave it as it is, unless when you speak with her, she says that that's not something she would do. And I'm wondering, Ms. would be so out of protocol, but I'm just wondering right now if it's possible that someone might be able to contact her and find that out while we're here.
She works for the school system, so hopefully she'll be available.
Well, hopefully so. I'm going to put an asterisk here, and we'll come back to that from the standpoint of whether or not she will accept being the judge thing, because we need to have some finality as best we can, because we have some deadlines we got to make in terms of this information being sent in. Is there any other question about any other name here in Carthage?
Now, currently, Kimberly Gibson is the chief judge, is that right? And you mentioned there may be some legal things we have to do to change that position.
No. The Republican chair has said that they would trust our recommendation, so if Kim is working, if Kim is willing to work for a judge, she would, and there's no problem, as I see the statutes.
So she could move to a
She
judge.
could move to one of our judges, yes.
Is there any other discussion on any other name here? If there isn't, let's go to DHR, Deep River High Falls.
Deborah Barrett, I just got off the phone with her, and she is not willing to serve as chief judge. She did say that she may have misunderstood what the party was asking. She thought they were asking if she would like to continue to serve, but she is not interested in serving as a chief judge. Vicki Cox is usually our chief judge in the Robbins precinct.
Okay. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
I'd like to clarification. Is Mrs. Barrett's home precinct DHR?
No, I believe it's Robbins, but her husband works in Robbins.
That's
He's a
correct.
judge.
And I actually, it's something I missed, was I actually had her listed for both, which, that's another issue that we have, we're going to encounter all day. And that we have family members or spouses that are working for the board. Here again, I had spoken with Mrs. Barrett, and she had said that she was willing to work. But then Ms. Cox is also a Democrat, or she
She is unaffiliated.
but I had recommended her, and so in this case, I'm happy with either.
okay. Well, since you spoke to her,
About 10 minutes ago.
well, they spoke to her about 10 minutes ago. She
I'm
said
happy
she
with
did,
either.
and
I'm
we're
happy with
satisfied.
either, or if you
Okay.
flip the recommendation, I'm happy with it.
All right, so we'll go with Vicki Cox unless there's some objection.
But I believe you said that she's worked in the Robbins precinct.
Yeah,
that's
she's
correct.
typically our chief judge in the Robbins precinct. Donna Ritter is usually our chief judge and has been our chief judge. I'm not sure how many years.
And DHR,
Yes.
well, I would still be happy if Ms. Barrett would serve as a judge in DHR, and you would leave the status quo.
Okay, I can call Deborah and ask her if she's willing to serve as a judge.
Since we're flipping.
And that's what she had been before, right?
She had served, I believe she had served as judge 1 year. She's possibly 2 elections. I would have to go back and double check. I believe in November, she served as a judge.
And then one more clarification. DHR is an unincorporated area, is it not? So it would not be affected by the municipal elections this fall.
And I think if I remember correctly, statute 163:41C indicates that if one wasn't available, you can take one from a different precinct, so that's statutory. So we can do that. All right. But it has to be by consensus, is what the statute says. So, would you make a motion that we would?
I would make a recommendation based on the Democratic chair's agreement that we flip what's been written down as the Democratic precinct official recommendations, and that Vicki Cable Cox be appointed the chief judge for the Deep River High Falls precinct, and that Deborah Schamberger Barrett be a judge of the elections.
I thought Vicki Cox was going back to her home to the precinct she'd been serving in, no?
Oh,
And he said he was fine with the current status quo of the precinct.
I didn't.
Yeah, the only reason I'm asking for a vote is because I believe the statute indicates that if you get some from another precinct, that it has to be put through a unanimous vote. That's the only reason I was asking for a vote, just to accept her instead. And so my question is, does everyone agree? Did you make that motion? You just made a motion, just leave Deborah, just in regard to Vicki Cox.
Okay, you want me to amend the motion then?
Please.
All right, then all I'm saying then is that Vicki Cox be appointed as the chief judge for Deep River High Falls. And I delete anything that I said relative to Deborah Barrett.
No, sir.
No, that's still not correct.
Okay, so what is it? What is the discussion now about Deborah? I'm sorry.
Well, Deborah should be moved to the judge position.
That's what my original motion.
The chief judge remains Deborah Donna Ritter. Is what Maurice.
Oh, I see what he's saying. I see what he's saying. So that issue is, but it can only be one judge. Right. Okay.
One chief judge.
The chief judge is already established. And what we're talking about is the judges. But Helen Manus is one judge. And there can only be a judge from the other party. And there were two names here. And the name that is being recommended from the party is Vicki Cox, correct?
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Jimmy Russell has been a Democratic judge. He is recently, or I say recently, within the year, I think, changed to unaffiliated. That's why his name is listed over in unaffiliated. He has served as judge in that precinct for a good number of years.
Okay. So again, Helen Manus is established as a judge. Donna Ritter is established as the chief judge. The recommendation from the other party is Vicki Cox. Is that correct?
Let's ask
Vicki
Mr. Hobbs
Cox.
again. what-
Is that what you
She's
meant?
been serving as chief judge in Robbins.
Ms. Cox is serving as the chief judge in Robbins.
Oh,
But DHR is her
okay.
precinct. This is the confusion that you
All
can
right.
get totally confused and in a bog and figuring this out when you've got people that are serving out the precinct.
Right. I was just going by
So
the names that were
my
done.
recommendation though is for Deborah Schamberger Barrett be approved to serve out of precinct in DHR as a judge. And Ms. Ritter, who's serving as a chief judge there, and that way we would keep the status quo for what's in DHR, which does not even have an election this fall.
Right.
All right, is that clear?
And the Republican has said that they would do what we recommend, and staff recommends that Jimmy Russell be named. He did not work last year simply because of COVID, and that's when Helen stepped up and acted as a judge. And so staff would recommend that Deborah Barrett be the Democratic judge, that Jimmy Russell be the unaffiliated judge. And the law just says no more than 2 of those 3 judges can be of the same party, so it's fine to use unaffiliated. And Donna Ritter be the chief judge.
It's Donna Garner.
Okay, but,
We want
Donna Garner.
Donna Garner to start.
Yeah.
but one of the 2, did you not say was unwilling to serve?
I don't think I said that.
No, I was asking. Yeah.
Deborah Barrett just doesn't want to serve as a chief judge. With
Gotcha.
the chief judge
Okay,
serves-
we're fine. We're fine. We're
So
fine.
then that,
But
I
I believe
apologize.
she would be willing to serve, she has served as judge in the past, so, I know Deborah Barrett.
So where do we leave Vicky Cox then? Is she out?
She's going to Robbins, where she's always been.
We're gonna put her back in Robbins
Is it,
as a chief.
We just think we gotta get to
can I
Rob.
make my third stab?
No, we don't want any more missions.
All right, okay, now we have clarity.
Well, except.
You want
I'm teasing.
Vicky Cox, but in a different
That's right.
precinct,
I
Yeah,
listed
we were trying
everybody-
to-
I listed everybody by their own precinct.
right? And what we're trying to do is to settle this one right here,
That's
right now. So we'll get to her when we get
You
to
you
Rob.
have to consult my recommendations and the highlighted packet there in order to see the full picture.
Okay, so we're in agreement that we can move on from DHR now?
I don't know. You don't have anything on the record saying that Deborah Barrett is appointed
Well, once
as
you get
a.
to the end, you're going to approve all you just approved. With the motion.
Well, I would accept the staff's recommendation, maybe that we just need a motion, it's the one you just made. But we can do that at the end if you prefer. Well, we're just making motions on some and not others. I'm just trying to get some clarity on how we're doing this.
Some things require motions, others don't. So
Okay.
I think the confusion came, at least it did for me. I wasn't understanding what party chair was saying. I thought we were on DHR.
Right.
And we're trying to sell DHR. But what he was really saying is he wanted that person, but in a different place,
Right.
in Robbins. And so what we have now is, let's move on to East Aberdeen.
Can I,
Yes,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
no,
Can I tell you, I did speak with Phyllis.
yes.
She prefers to work in West Aberdeen. She does not want to be a judge at this time. She wants to work, but she doesn't want to be a judge, and she wants to stay in West Aberdeen. She was Carthage. Her home precinct's Carthage, but she has always served at West Aberdeen.
So she would just move to West Aberdeen as an assistant? Or
That's what she's on.
That's what she's been doing, and she said she would rather keep it that way right now.
Okay. All right. Party chair, were you?
I'm
What's
aware
the
of
same?
what staff is sharing.
Okay. All right. Let's move to East Aberdeen.
East Aberdeen, we had a recommendation for a David Lucier to be the chief judge. We've had Mary Beth Thomas serve as the chief judge in
Out of
that
precinct.
out of precinct. Kathy Hinton has served as a judge, I believe, out of precinct in that. Yes,
Okay, so Chief Judge David Lucier, are you saying he didn't want to do it?
no, he said he would be willing to be a chief judge. That was one of the recommendations.
Okay, so he will be Chief Judge, all right. You wouldn't highlight, that's what I was saying.
He's just never been a chief judge before.
Gotcha. Okay. Is there any discussion with any of the names here that we need to get clarification on?
maybe I should have said the highlighted ones are the ones that have served in that capacity
Okay.
in some year.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
Mary Beth Thomas actually resides in Pine Bluff. And so I recommend that we use her in Pine Bluff in some capacity and continue with Dale Crumpton as one of our judges there in East Aberdeen.
Okay. I
Okay?
did notice when I looked over everything that there was a dearth of people volunteering in Pine Bluff. So,
Yes.
okay. So
So I
Chief
think
Judge,
East Aberdeen's good.
okay. So we're removing Mary Beth Thomas here. And we have as Chief Judge David Lucier, Judge Kathy Hinton, Judge Mary Beth, Dale Crumpton. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
in my recommendation, Ms. Hinton is, being recommended over in West Aberdeen, which is her home precinct.
Which one now?
West Aberdeen,
Which person?
Mrs. Hinton,
Okay.
Kathy Ray Hinton.
And you're recommending her for judge, not chief judge?
Actually, I think I've got her for chief judge in West Aberdeen. Yes, because Lori Staples, serves out of precinct and she's from Taylortown. But also, these are recommendations, and I'm supposed to recommend 2 names, a maximum of 2, which it leaves it up to the board's discretion as to what you all would like to do.
Okay, but in this instance, you're recommending Kathy Hinton, but not for East Aberdeen. So
That's
there's
correct.
only one name here now, and
That's
that's
correct.
I.
That's why I only
Fleming.
have one name there for chief judge. But you were gonna make her a judge in East Aberdeen. And I just wanted to bring up that I had recommended her for the chief judge in West Aberdeen.
Okay,
And Lori Staples, she's recommended, or she's previously served in West Aberdeen as chief judge, or what are you recommending on her?
Taylortown, her home precinct.
Taylortown, okay.
I think the reason why we don't have her in Taylortown is because West Aberdeen is a much larger voting precinct, and she has been a site supervisor for One Stop, and we know that she can handle a much larger precinct than Taylortown. She's a very good chief judge.
all right. Well, let's go back to East Aberdeen. I want to make sure we have some conclusion on each of these as we go. So right now, we have Chief Judge David Lucier. Is that correct? Then Judge Ali Fleming Holland, and then Dale Crumpton. Is that right? Is that what you have?
No, Miss Fleming Holland, she's always, well, from my understanding, has been an assistant.
Yeah, but there was a recommendation, since Kathy Hinton is going to be doing chief judge in Aberdeen. The other listing for a judge was Ali Fleming Holland. Is that right?
No.
Didn't make a recommendation.
No, I didn't make a recommendation. I would think that with a Democratic chief judge or an unaffiliated chief judge, that you would want to appoint someone from the Republican Party so that you have balance in the precinct.
Okay, Dale Crumpton is the Republican judge, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Is Mr. Lucier unaffiliated?
He's unaffiliated.
My apologies.
but he is your recommendation.
He is my recommendation. I spoke to him this morning.
Okay, so again, restate to me where we are in terms of chief judge and the 2 judges for East Aberdeen.
I only have a recommendation of David Lucier for chief judge. I do not have a recommendation for judge.
Okay, so Ollie Fleming Holland, who is here, as a recommendation,
As an assistant.
as
Those
an
are all
assistant, yes,
assistants,
but not another judge. I
not
got
as
it.
another judge.
All right. So who are we recommending for a judge from the Democratic Party in East Aberdeen?
I do not have a recommendation.
Okay, and is there a recommendation?
Well, I mean, I'm not in the Democrat Party, but you're moving Phyllis Stillwell from Carthage back to East Aberdeen, and she's,
West.
oh, to West Aberdeen. I'm
West
sorry,
Aberdeen.
well, I put her in the wrong block then, so that's my fault. I'm sorry.
No problem. Again, discussion into clarity is reached. All right. But we still need a judge. For East Aberdeen, we have one judge. We need another judge.
What do we do absent a recommendation? So
If we don't get it filled within 30 days of the election, then the sheriff makes a temporary appointment, and then it has to go back to either party to sign off on who works the next election. Do you want me to call?
do you think we could
It's-
No.
Ask,
No,
Ernestine Chapman was the person that asked.
at this point,
Looking at the assistants, Ernestine Chapman would be.
you think we could ask Ernestine then if she would do it? Maybe do appoint her and then
Who?
Ernestine Chapman.
Her
She
sister,
can't work.
She can't, that's
she's
why
on
she
the
can't,
ballot.
I'm sorry,
her sister's
Her
woman.
sister's a candidate, I'm sorry. I forgot about.
All right. Is there a recommendation from the board here, and we can see whether or not the party would agree with it?
That's not the proper thing to do right now.
So-
Y'all are in charge until the next election if we don't have somebody to name, so.
So, Madam Director, you're saying to do what here?
I just think officially advise the party where we don't have people to make a permanent recommendation. Because if we don't make them today and we use them later, we always are supposed to go back to the party to get them to sign off on who's gonna work the next election.
So, are you suggesting that we need to wait for the party to make a recommendation here?
I think so.
All right.
I really do.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'll make the recommendation of Mrs. Hinton, since she served in that precinct.
Ms. Who?
Mrs. Kathy Ray Hinton,
The one that you were going to recommend for
for
chief
West
judge
Aberdeen.
in West Aberdeen?
Yeah.
Okay. So the name is already here.
It's already there.
As a judge,
Yes, it's a
Okay.
judge. That means that she's an out of precinct judge,
yeah,
which I think that you all have to have a motion and a vote on, since she's out of precinct, correct?
Yeah, well, we can do that.
Okay.
A motion?
and Kathy's always liked working on that side of the tracks, so, you know.
Yeah, I want to make sure.
Small- Yeah, it's the smaller precinct,
Okay.
so,
I just want to make sure everything is right and
Right.
in order. We need to make a motion. Let's make a motion on Kathy Hinton, who's already highlighted here.
okay, I'm not doing very well in motions, but I'll try again. I would move that we appoint Kathy Hinton, who is out of precinct, but nonetheless appoint her as a judge in East Aberdeen precinct.
Second.
Second. Is it moving properly? Second. If there's no objection, so moved, and we'll move on to East Norwood.
Okay, East Norwood, we had the recommendation of Tricia Watts, which she has been the chief judge in that precinct, so we are, I feel that's a very good recommendation.
Okay, and we have two names highlighted from the other party here, and we need to determine which of those two would be the judge.
Well, we need two judges. So both Lydia Weaver and Barry Stabile have been judges in that precinct previously.
So,
Mr. Stabile once served as chief judge as well.
so you don't have a recommendation for East Norwood for judge?
No, but Hollis Powell had served as in that precinct, I believe.
She served, Holly Powell, she served there in November, and she is a registered Democrat. We moved her back to her home precinct, which is West Norwood, just down the street, so we can. But she has served as judge in East Norwood as well.
Okay.
Craig, may I borrow Richard's Bible, please?
She wants to use your Bible.
So I see you have Diamond Barrett as an assistant. You weren't recommending her as a judge?
In what, East Norwood?
Still in East Norwood. I'm trying to finish this one.
Okay.
And that may
Remember
be-
that my sheet, I brought everybody back to their home
Yeah.
precinct.
So that we moved Diamond back to East Norwood only because her sister Lyric serves in Taylortown, and we couldn't have them in the same precinct, so we did move, Diamond back to East Norwood. But she was recommended as an, assistant, I believe. in Taylortown.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Which I thought Pat Watts really enjoyed working with her,
Okay.
so. And she's a little younger, but some younger folks, some younger blood in that.
Well, that's good too.
Yeah,
All right. Okay, but the question remains is in East Norwood, we have the chief judge. And we have, from one party, we have two suggestions for judge. How and whom are we gonna make judge for East Norwood? Who is the second judge? Suggestions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Barrett would be acceptable to the Democratic Party. Her home precinct is Taylortown.
Okay, so the party recommendation is Diamond Barrett for East Norwood for judge. Okay. That being the case, if that's going to be the case, it's a party recommendation. Who then, between Barry Stabile, is that how it's pronounced? And Lydia Weaver, would the party choose to be their representative, to be their judge?
I'll recommend Lydia Weaver.
Party recommends Lydia Weaver. Marty's not here today. Is there any objection to that recommendation? Since both names are here, we can accept that. Let's move to Eureka.
okay, we got a party recommendation for chief judge, for Catherine Drexel.
Yes.
She is happy to serve in that capacity. We typically, our judges in that precinct have been Thomas Vanderhoovel and a Cooper D'Amato.
Okay, and the party recommendations were,
The party recommendations were Cassie Drexel. Susan Leary has, returned her, she no longer would like to work the polls. I'd have her mail her back. And for judges, Donna Hildebrand and Jeannie Dennick, of which both of them said they are willing to work in the polls this year.
are there any objections here? Okay, so on record, we have who for chief judge and who are the two judges?
I would say I would have Cassie Drexel would be.
Is the
willing to
chief
s-
judge.
Yep, would be willing to serve as the chief judge. Ms. Hildebrand and Ms. Dinner, I'm not, they've worked one election for us, so they've only worked in the capacity of an assistant so far. Our previous elections, we've had Mr. Vanderpool and Ms. D'Amato.
And it's D'Amato.
D'Amato Cooper.
Cooper D'Amato,
Oh,
Her last name is Cooper.
okay, sorry.
and that's her home precinct, right?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I would recommend that she be the judge, because the Vanderhoovel's out of precinct, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and so are you recommending Donna Hildebrand for judge?
I have Dinner and Hildebrand as my two recommendations.
Okay, which of the two?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Okay, the staff said Donna Hildebrand is the one you mentioned, so
I didn't mention her. She
Sorry.
just said each of them only work one election, so
Those
Oh.
two,
as assistants.
Okay, well, let's make a decision. We'll vote on this. Someone make a motion between these two, because we can only have one. Donna Hildebrand or Jean Dennis, and both of them have agreed that they will accept it. Oh, is that right?
I have not been
We
able
don't
to, I have no idea.
Mr. Chair, you don't have a preference between the two?
I mean, I choose Hildebrand.
all right, I'll make a motion that Donna Hildebrand be additional judge for the Democrats in addition to the Chief Judge Drexel.
Can I amend that to say that D'Amato Cooper will be the Republican judge?
Yes, amended. Motion made, amended to include on the
I
other
agree
party
with you.
side. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that Donna Hildebrand will be Democratic Party judge, and that by amendment Cooper D'Amato will be for the Republican side. Are there any other questions, discussion in Eureka? Then I can say Eureka and we can move on. Eureka. All right, let's move on to Eastwood.
For Eastwood, I have recommendations for Samantha Gallagher, who I, did not receive her mailer back or, no response to an email if she would like to continue working polls. I did contact Megan Sorenka. She is willing to serve as chief judge. And Lemuel Sadias, I have not received any response from his mailer or emails.
Dan, we call everybody else, all right?
The others listed on my sheet returned their mailers or emails stating that they would continue to serve. But that was prior to any recommendations. That was done back in March and April.
Megan Renko has agreed to say yes,
She
correct?
did agree to serve as chief judge.
Mr. Chair, is that fine with you?
That is fine. I will accept,
Okay,
Sarenka's recommendation for chief judge. And I'd rather, Mrs. Gallagher be moved over and to the judge slot.
Who?
Samantha Gallagher. Right above Ms. Sarenka. So my recommendations.
okay. She was the one that gave no response.
Right, that's correct. I attempted to speak with her yesterday. I did get her on the phone, but she was in a meeting.
Do we need a second judge for that precinct?
Claire Duclair is what we would recommend. She works for us.
So is that how?
Yeah, we'll give that recommendation to staff.
Claire Duclair,
Okay.
Sean over on the unaffiliated.
All right, so for Chief Judge Megan Sarenko, for Judge Gallagher, and for Judge Claire DeClose. Is there any further discussion with that? If not, we'll move on to Little River.
All right, for Little River, we have a recommendation of Sandra Myers and Allison Conrad. I've not received any response back from Allison on whether or not she would like to continue to work. Our chief judge in that precinct has been Cynthia Duckett for a number of years. And the two judges for the last couple of years have been Mr. Wagner and Ms. Garner, two unaffiliated.
Okay, so the recommendation was Sandra Myers, is that right?
Yes.
Have you talked to her, Maurice?
No, I have not.
She did agree to work. I have not reached out to her about working as a chief judge. She was new last November, so she, as an assistant.
So, Mr. Chair, is that your recommendation?
Let me ask a question of staff. Who was the previous chief judge in that precinct
Cynthia Duckett,
and her affiliation?
she is Republican. And then the two judges, the last possibly two elections, maybe three, have been Ms. Garner, who's unaffiliated, and a Mr. Wagner, who is unaffiliated.
And what happened to Ms. Brown that was out there? Did she not want to work again?
I don't think so. What was Ms. Brown's first name? Oh, Clara Bell. That's right, Clara. She does want to work, but now I don't know that we've ever had her, has she served as a judge?
No, she hasn't, but
She's unaffiliated. as
she is
well.
unaffiliated also.
I will stay with Myers as a recommendation. Little River is an unincorporated area, and there's no municipal elections this fall.
Well, do you recommend one of the assistants as a judge there, Sandra Myers or Allison Conrad?
Sandra Myers.
And who would be judge?
There's a
No, for the other side.
Now, wait a minute, who's your chief judge?
Sandra Myers.
Sandra Myers,
And who's your judge?
Kerska. Deborah Ann Jansen Kerska.
Now, we did have her working in Bass only because her husband was working in Little River. They both, Little River's their home precinct, so we separated the two.
So you wanna stick with her, Maurice?
Yeah. Wouldn't it be just as easy to flip them and to send him to that?
Except, but we need men down in Little River. And Mr. Chair, I will tell you, I have a concern. Little River is so far away from Carthage that it's not really wise to put two brand new people down there as judge and chief judge that have no experience.
I can understand that. You have another recommendation?
Well, the other recommendation is, you know, with the status quo. I mean, I'm not very happy with it because it's not a Democrat there, but
Is there another Democrat that you can pick from some place else that we can move to a precinct?
actually, there would be one, there would be one unaffiliated that I listed.
Would the chair be, party chairman, be happy with both Democrats being judges? So you just have a Republican chief judge and then two Democratic judges?
There's one person in Bass that I would be happy with, that's an unaffiliated voter, that has worked Little River Precinct previously, and that is James Elliott.
James Elliott,
Yes.
did Mr. Elliott say he was working? So if he is willing to be a judge, you'd be happy with that?
That would be acceptable.
And he wants Sandra Benn as your other judge?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, now, is Sandra Myers the chief judge or a judge?
But like you be the chief judge, that's where I have listed as the chief judge.
I think our concern would be she only has one election under her belt. And it being out in Little River, which is a good 20, 30 minutes from us. If there's something should go wrong,
That's the reason for the recommendation of Mr. Elliott to be out there with his report about that precinct product.
I was gonna move up here, Maurice. Process is inappropriate. You hired somebody that quit on the job. Can't believe that.
Who quit on the job? Who are we talking about?
The assistant that walked out in the middle of an election. He made her chief judge. I can't believe it.
Who's that?
He's on it.
There's no documentation of it. There's not any written documentation. So, I mean,
Didn't have to be anything written
It
because
doesn't have to be written, Maurice.
she's not an employee. You spoke to her, she was an assistant at the time,
Right.
and you made the board aware at that time.
Let's go back and see if we didn't dock the pay for not working the whole election. There's your documentation.
oh, I don't think we did.
Yeah, we did.
No, I'd say, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, I don't think we paid her for the
Yeah.
entire election. So,
we were speaking about Little River. And Mr. Elliott was my recommendation for the judge, and Ms. Myers for the chief judge.
I would be fine with Cynthia Duckett is remaining as the chief judge and bringing Elliott up. And then since Sandra's only had one election under her belt, move her into a judge position and let her get that education, in another election. Would be, from my side, I would be fine with that. That's fine.
Okay. So what we're gonna need to do here is, from the standpoint of the board, is to make a motion about these positions.
So I'll make a motion that Cynthia Duckett will be appointed as chief judge in Little River. And we will move James Elliott from Bass to Little River as a judge, and Sandra Myers would also be a judge.
And is there a second?
Second.
You heard the question. It's been moving properly second. That the delegate would be Chief Judge Sandra Miles and Allison. James Elliott would be judges. You've heard the question. You prepared to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Okay, it's been so moved.
And next is
Southern Pines.
North Southern Pines. We had a recommendation of Patrick Smithson, who I spoke to. He would be more than willing to serve as the chief judge. We had Mr. Martin Wace Jr. be the chief judge for a number of years in that precinct, along with Mr. Philip Layton, who is unaffiliated, be a judge. And we've had a couple of others serve as judges in that precinct as well. Tricia Ray, who's unaffiliated. We also have the former chief judge from Pinehurst City, Mary Bradbury. She's moved to her home precinct, North Southern Pines. We have her serve as a judge as well. I don't think we had, I had no judge's recommendations.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
for North Southern Pines, my recommendation for chief judge is Mr. Smithson. I spoke with Mr. Smithson last week, and I had the same conversation that staff had with him. And then I would be acceptable to name Mr. Layton as a judge also.
Okay, let me understand. The chief judge, you're recommended as, who are you recommending as chief judge?
Smithson, Patrick Wayne Smithson.
Smith, okay.
Yes.
And as judge?
Mr. Layton.
Okay.
And that would be, they would both be unaffiliated individuals.
Okay, now, I see Martin Wace or Wassey Jr. was nominated as chief judge from the other party, and Judge Mary Bradbury. If Patrick Smithson is going to be the chief judge, would you want Martin Wace to be a judge or Mary Bradbury?
I'd say we'd move Martin down to judge.
All right, Madam Director, who do we have there?
It's my understanding that the Democratic Party is recommending chief judge
Yes.
as Patrick Smithson and Phil Layton as a judge, and the Republican Party has recommended, or they are happy with Martin Wace continuing as a judge. Mary Bradbury has served for years out of precinct. She's now, in Pinehurst City. She now lives in North Southern Pines precinct. She's never worked there, but I think she will be happy to do that. We've had problems. Our lifelong Democrat, Mr. Jack Barron, died, and so we've had some issues finding some people because of death and illness in that precinct.
So you're talking about moving, Bradbury to which precinct?
Leaving her right there as a judge. She was in Pinehurst seat previously as the chief judge, but she doesn't live there anymore, so
So she would be.
she'd just be an assistant there in that
An
precinct.
assistant. I got it. Okay. Let's move on to Pine Bluff.
Okay, Pine Bluff, we did not have any recommendations for chief judge other than, our chief judge that has served for a number of years, Pamela Wace. We did have a recommendation for Judge Joan Mangrum. She is unaffiliated.
That comes from the Republican Party, right?
No, that came from
Maurice.
Maurice.
Okay, okay.
And we also had another unaffiliated serve as a judge last year, a Mr. Cody Petrella.
Okay, so let me be clear about what the recommendations are. The recommendations for chief judge, who is the recommendation for chief judge?
Nobody made one.
Nobody made one.
The Republican Party said they were happy with what we had, so.
Okay. All right, do you have any objection with that?
No, I do not.
All right, so everything is in place at Pine Bluff, correct?
I would move Cody Petrella there. Well, he's an unaffiliated judge there. We may also want to ask Mary Beth Thomas, who served in East Aberdeen for years as a chief judge. And Pine Bluff is her home precinct.
Okay, so Joan Mangrum is a judge.
Yes,
Chief Judge Pamela Wace, is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay, and who will be the judge? Who will be the other judge? I heard two names.
Cody,
It doesn't matter to me.
Cody, Patera.
Petrella.
Petrella, Cody Petrella.
Okay, let's move on to Pine Dean.
Okay, for Pine Dean, Mr. Numchick was the chief judge last year. He contacted us. He is his mother's sole caretaker and is unable to work in any capacity this year.
Okay.
So, other than that, we did not have any other chief judge recommendations. For judge, we did have two recommendations from Maurice, Laurel Holden and Catherine Shermer. Laurel Holden, I have not received any response from her mail or email. And we do have some longstanding unaffiliated judges in that precinct, Maureen Kuster and Sarah Parrish.
All right, so how do we solve the issue of chief judge in Pine Dean?
I would ask staff of the people that have worked previously there, is there anyone that you would, staff would recommend moving up to that spot?
Last year, we asked Maureen and Sarah both, whenever Pat Allen had to stop working because of a heart condition. And neither one of those ladies, even though they're very seasoned, wished to take on that. And Lewis took it on and did a great job. But his mother is very sick and he's taking care of her, so that's not a possibility.
So I'm not sure if they would, to me, they would be my first choice, one of the ladies, since they've been there for so long. I just don't know if they would be willing to serve as a chief judge. So that would have to be a phone call.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
my conversation with Mr. Domchuk was similar to what staff had. And he did text me back the recommendation of Ms. Parrish and was Sutherland to tutor,
Yeah.
DeCuster.
diffuser, as his recommendations, because I asked him for recommendations as to who he thought would serve as a good replacement for him.
Okay, so, but neither he nor those two are willing to do it, so
I
who would?
understand, and so this is one where I don't have a recommendation of anyone that I've actually tried to vet.
Here's my thing, this was last year before the presidential. Now, I'm wondering, last year's presidential, that's a very big election versus this year's municipal. So I would be more inclined to call one of the ladies and see if they would be interested in maybe serving in a municipal election to get their feet wet versus getting their feet wet in a presidential. That seems like a lot of pressure as a first-time chief judge. So if Mr. Numchick speaks very highly of those two ladies, and they've worked alongside each other for years. So I think either one of those two ladies are more than qualified to do it, and I'm more than happy to reach out to either one of them to see if they'd be more than willing.
And I'm in agreement with that, and that I'm familiar with that precinct, having lived in that precinct for some time, and being familiar with Mrs. Allen also.
Yeah.
When she was working at that precinct.
Okay, so
Even though she's a different party, so.
okay, so where we are in Pine Dean is it's tabled until you can get in
Yeah,
contact with
let
those two
me
people.
call those two ladies and see if they'd be, one of them would.
Okay, that being the case, who will be the two judges?
Well, I definitely think if one of the two ladies is willing to step up as a chief judge, I would be more inclined to keep the other one as a judge, only because they're very familiar with each other working together.
Now, there are two names down here for,
And then, like,
They didn't return the survey or anything.
okay, well, then okay.
now I will tell you, Ms. Shermer, I believe, if that's how you say her name, Shermer. I believe she said she's willing to work. I just don't know if she'd be willing to work in a judge capacity.
I understand.
Okay, so, it was Ms. Holden that I never received any,
Okay. Well, my recommendation would be Mrs. Shermer.
okay.
as-
Yeah,
as the
she did return.
Democratic judge.
She returned her mailing,
Okay,
so we can,
we'll use her name.
okay.
And we will, you're gonna talk to, Costa and Parrish and see if one will be chief judge and the other judge.
Mhm.
Pinehurst A1.
Okay, Pinehurst A1. We had two recommendations. Carol Black has been, the chief judge out of precinct, there for a number of years, along with a recommendation of a Lee Bozich, who has been a judge in that precinct for a number of years for us.
Okay, so we're in agreement that everything is in place in Pinehurst A1?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the Democratic Party's recommendation for Pinehurst A1 is Tricia Lee Bozick as chief judge. Ms. Black is from Pinehurst A2, that's her home precinct. And then also for judge would be Rosa Riccio.
Chief Judge Patricia Bozick and Judge Rosa Riccio
Riccio.
and other Judge Jennifer Tomlin. Is that correct?
She served in that capacity for a number of years, Jennifer Tomlin.
Well, I would ask, Patricia Bozick, you're looking at moving her to chief judge, but has she worked an election before?
Oh, yeah,
She's worked a number of years as a judge
Okay,
with Carol, yes.
Okay.
They've been,
that's fine.
All right. And for the other judge is Jennifer Tumlin, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Pinehurst A2.
okay, we had recommendations for a Nancy Anders, who has been,
The chairman has just recommended Carol Black, is that correct?
Pinehurst A2, Nancy Andrews is the current chief judge. Carol Black has served out of precinct in Pinehurst A1. I've got her listed as a judge, but then I also have Diane Hughes, chief judge, as my second choice. And then you have Carl Anders, who cannot serve, the two Anders cannot serve in the same precinct. But this is a special situation in that you have three people with experience serving as chief judges in precincts. In essence, I'm acceptable for any one of those three because you've got experience. But Nancy Anders has served in that precinct as chief judge. So I guess my first preference is Nancy Anders for chief judge and Carol Black for the judge. And Pinehurst A2.
Okay. And has anyone, would Carol Black be amenable to that?
Probably not, but it's okay.
So we're going to have to get in. So here where we are is we're going to have to get in contact with Ms. Mike to see whether or not that would be something she would do.
Mr. Chair, just make your appointment. If then they refuse to work or to take a position, we'll go back and have to work on it. As much as we would love for this to be the final, the evening before the election, you're gonna be brought some names that we've got to put in there, and that's just the way it is.
All right.
So
All right.
we would love for it to be as permanent because we've got to get people trained. But we will have extra people, and as we have said before, we've got several precincts that are going to have experienced people that we'll go ahead and train as backup just in case. And we'll still be dealing with the COVID restrictions, so that may impact what people will be doing this election.
Okay, so tentatively we have Nancy as chief judge.
Carol Black is a judge and Wayne Hicks as a judge.
All right, let's move on to Pine Bluff.
Pinehurst B1, we had a recommendation of Bobby McLaughlin, and she has been chief judge in that precinct for a number of years.
Okay.
We also had a recommendation of Michael Carroll as a judge. Again, he's served as a judge in that precinct for a number of years.
Okay.
And I would like to make a recommendation for the Republican judge to be, to be the third judge as, and she's going back to her name, Bundy.
Yeah, she went, she's
Lori Bundy. She has worked with us and she's worked in one style.
All right, is that? Just kidding. Is that,
Lori Bundy.
is fine?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to Pine Bluff B2.
Pinehurst B2, this is where we had recommendation of, well, Carl Anders has been the chief judge there. He does, he's the chief judge out of precinct. But his wife is the chief judge in A2. We also had a recommendation for judge Caridad Vicente. The only response I had back from her, I believe she is in the Navy. The reason why she hadn't returned her mailer back was she was trying to decide whether she should, I guess, re-enlist or move up in the Navy. Or that she used the term, year up or something. So she didn't want to return it and then say she couldn't work. But that was the last conversation I had with her, and that was a couple months ago.
Did you talk with her, Maurice?
No, I have not.
Okay.
Mr.
I would say
Chairman,
let's try it anyway.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
for Pinehurst B2, I would recommend Mr. Andrews as the chief judge. And as a substitute, Wilson McWilliams.
As a judge. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Instead of Caridad?
Instead of Caridad Vicente.
And then our other judge was a Mr. Linville. He
Okay.
served that capacity last election.
All right. Pinehurst C.
All right, Pinehurst C. We had a recommendation for Betty Mangum to be the chief judge. We also had a recommendation for Cheryl Fry to serve as one of the judges, which she has served in that capacity before. And the other recommendation was Caitlin Conati. I haven't been able to get any response from her. Caitlin.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Democratic Party, our recommendation is Betty Mangum as chief judge and Cheryl Cook Fry as judge.
Okay, and then James Matt, is that correct?
Well, let me ask staff
Yes, sir.
one question.
Yes, sir.
It looks like the chair of the Republican Party has recommended Sandra Teaberry as judge as an option.
Those are extra people.
Okay, so,
And Sandra's works as an assistant, so we've got her listed as assistant, so she's not really new to us.
so James Mannix would be the
James Matt.
recommendation.
Okay.
Yes.
Where are we now?
Robbins.
Well, I tell you what, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. All right?
I like the way you're thinking. Yeah, I was gonna say. I don't think I made that better.
Where's that water at? Yes.
All right, no more over here.
Right there, Craig. I think that's what they need. Is it, has it been opened?
I figured that to start with.
Sometimes the commissioner stuff.
This case.
Were you on the board the last time they did this process? Is this typical and just watch more to it? Yeah, you know, it's confusing. We don't know the people like they know the people.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
they know.
true.
So I go with if staff is good, then really, like from my side, I got no recommendation. I mean, as far as there was no one they said, hey, I really want you to try to get this person in this spot. So
Well, I want you to know. I try to get you to- And I really, I don't want anybody to feel that way, but I'm going to do what I think is right.
And that's just like these people on this list. I don't care if they got a D beside their name or a R beside their name. They're all in it for the right reasons.
And especially people they're talking about been working in every year doing it, and you come in line. That's what you look.
Yeah.
All right, we'll make it a 10-minute recess. And I call that out of necessity.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I was starting to float away to it. Somehow out of nowhere, they had hydration. You know, first practice, it's called first time. You know where you've been this day?
It's pretty.
If you go, you stop and turn right, there's a nursing home running corner, so all care.
I was just gonna go ask Carrie a question.
Most people were all care. Oh, yeah. Got family.
Amazing things you folks know about some of these people. Yeah. The
Spend
health
so much
history,
time. Yeah, I might go get that.
stuff like that.
We're gonna have to end our meeting and come back into session later. They've got to have the equipment for the commissioners meeting. Their equipment has failed, so this is the county's equipment. They've got to have it.
What time does it make start? 6?
They said they don't need to pick it up till 4:30.
I don't know.
We go ask her.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go on.
We're in short rows now.
You say I'm a country boy, I know what that means.
That's right.
We have a slide truck and a mule, so I know what truck was.
There you go.
All right. Okay.
Okay, their meeting is at 4:30, so the quickest we can.
Okay,
Get ready
let's
I think,
well,
I think,
Hey, Mr. Case,
I think you might restroom. He was having to wait in line and stuff.
Okay. We are now on
Robbins?
Robbins. Okay. Everyone is back and in place, so we will resume with Robbins.
Robin, we had a recommendation from Maurice for Deborah Barrett to be the chief judge.
Okay, we've already gone there.
That's-
Our
that's a-
recommendation
Would be,
is now Vicky Cox,
Yes,
okay.
Willis Barrett as the judge of elections, and Linda Russell as judge of elections.
All right. Let's move on to Seven Lakes.
Okay, Seven Lakes. We had a recommendation for Ann Spong and Patricia or Pat Slaughton from Maurice, and for chief judge, and Barry Slaughton for judge.
And the Zlottens cannot work in the same precinct.
I understand that, but here again, just for me to be able to try and figure this out was to move everybody into their own precincts. My recommendation for chief judge is Ann Spong, and for judge would be Patricia Zlotkin.
You said for Chief Judge whom?
Ann Spong,
And is that Arthur Spong? Is
He won't be able to work.
okay.
Yeah.
So you will be able to use, maybe use him somewhere else.
He's got diabetes and won't go anywhere else.
And how's that last name spelled?
Spong.
Oh, I see. Instead of Arthur and.
Ann is his wife, and
I got it.
Maurice is asking her to be the chief judge there.
I understand. Got it. Okay. And for judge,
We've had,
Who'd you say Maurice for judge?
Patricia Zlotkin.
so now he's,
Okay.
I just moved Barry over there because that's his home precinct. And that's the way I did this, so that I could see where people are based on their home precincts.
what is Patricia's last name?
Zlotin, Zlotin.
Oh, from
So he's
oh, I
making
see,
her
I see
judge
what you're
instead
saying.
of chief judge.
Okay. You know, besides Cheryl Coppola,
she's the chief judge for a number of
A
years.
judge.
A judge for a number of years in that precinct, and Yvonne Merrill has served as judge in that precinct
okay,
last year.
so the judge will be whom?
Cheryl Copeland.
Okay. Let's move on to Southern Side.
We had a recommendation of a June Chavis and for a Peggy Cable from Democratic Party. June has been the chief judge in that precinct for a number of years. That's who we would.
June Chambers, do you have any opposition to that?
No, I do not.
Okay, judge is Viola Singletary, is that right?
Yep, she has served as a judge for a number of years, along with Mr. David Owens.
Okay, let's move on to Jellicoe.
We had a recommendation of a Lori Staples as the chief judge and a Lyric Barrett. I think we would be more inclined to keep Lori Staples over in West Aberdeen and recommend Lyric Barrett as the chief judge. And then have Cynthia Elliott. She's been a judge in that precinct for a number of years.
Okay, and John McNeil?
He has served there a couple of times, yeah.
I concur with the staff since we moved my West Aberdeen recommendation back to East Aberdeen.
Okay, let's move on to Vass.
Can I ask,
Yes.
I'm a little confused because you said move Lori Staples over to West Aberdeen. Didn't we already, she was originally shown as Lori Staples was shown as the chief judge in West Aberdeen. I thought we were putting Kathy Hinton there.
We moved her back to East Aberdeen. Kathy then went back to East Aberdeen.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Intelligent.
Yes. So, recommendation from, Maurice would be Sue McKenzie. She has been a, chief judge in that precinct for a number of years. We didn't get any recommendations for judge, so the two that have served as judges in that precinct are Sarah Odom and Susan Wagner.
Okay, so Chief Judge Sue McKenzie, and no recommendation, Mr. Chair, for the judge?
I'll be acceptable to amenable to the status quo.
Okay, so we have Susan McKenzie, Chief Judge, we have Sarah Oldham, Judge, and who is the other judge now?
Susan Wagner.
And Susan Wagner, okay?
West Aberdeen, we had Lori Staples as the chief judge. And then we had a recommendation from Maurice for Judge Dwight Danzer. And then we had two that have previously served as judges in that precinct were Kathy Giquinto and Sonia Jones.
Okay.
I think Sonia Jones as the judge. The
Okay,
third judge, please.
all right. Westmore,
Westmore, we had no recommendations for chief judge, so our current chief judge would be Anthony Crisco. We did have a recommendation from Maurice for a judge position, Shirley Brewer, which she has served in that capacity before. And the other judge we had serving there was a Brenda Cassidy.
is everybody in agreement with Anthony Crisco, Shirley Brewer, and Brenda Cassidy?
Yes.
Let's move on to West Noble.
West Noble, we have a recommendation from Maurice for a Dee Hannah, which she has been the chief judge in that precinct for a number of years. We also had a recommendation from Maurice for Judge Holly Hollis or Holly Powell, which she has served in that capacity prior to as well.
And Beverly Bizzle has been your other judge.
Okay,
So it looks good.
all right, West End.
Okay, West End,
Before.
Yes.
Susan Holbrook. Holbrook. And West End. Or West
That will
Holbrook.
be for the assistants.
Okay. Later. Sorry.
No,
for West End, we had a recommendation from Maurice Jean Williams, who is unaffiliated. She's been the chief judge there for a number of years. We also had a recommendation of Judge Ernestine McCary. She was a candidate. She just called yesterday.
She is a
She
candidate.
is a
She
candidate.
cannot come off.
She can't come off the ballot, so she
Right.
She can't work this election.
can't work this election, but we can appoint her. She's been a previous poll worker. She just can't serve this election.
I understand. Okay,
The two other folks that have served as judges in that precinct are Lydia Kennard and Barry Zlot.
Mr. Chairman.
yes, sir.
Mr. Zlotton would be my recommendation for judge.
Okay. All right,
And Lydia Conrad would be, or Kennard would be the
Yes.
other one.
all right. Well, tentatively, we see where we are. But we need to make a motion about when are we gonna, Madam Director, what comes next with this?
Well, we will need to,
Because there's some people that gotta be called.
right, there are some people that have to be called. And Mr. Chair, I would just recommend that the final deferment, that we defer the final approval of this. I have something I would like to say. Once a precinct official becomes a precinct official, they become our employee and they're under our administration. We don't go back to the party and say, we've had problems with this, unless it gets to the point that we've got to dismiss somebody, and then that's a legal action and has to have hearings and all that. So it is not unusual that a party chair or people in the party knew that there was an issue with a worker. Now, the board has been informed about anytime we have problems with the worker. And as Angela said, I can sure that we can probably print out payroll. And today is highly unlikely. I know why the other gentleman got upset. We were not following protocol at all, because the numbers should have come, the name should have come in, and that should have been it. We should not have all this back and forth. I would recommend in 2 years, when you go through this, you actually set aside a work session with both party chairs and sit down so that you can have all this back and forth and understanding, so that when we go into this meeting, basically the slate is more complete and a little bit less cumbersome. I had, by mistake, been sent minutes from another county, and all they told their chairman was where we want somebody new or where we need somebody new. And so Maurice probably would be happy with that. And it is up to the party chairman to know if there's an issue they have, then this is the time that they would not recommend somebody. But in a work session, you'd be a little freer to work and have things clear. Because right now, we're gonna work on this, and I'm gonna have to listen to that daggone tape 100 times to make sure that I don't make a mistake. And then we'll bring it to you for a final approval. I think would be the easiest.
Well,
Plus,
I agree with you. That
Do you
we're
agree
off
with
about
that?
a work,
Yes.
about a work session next time, because, again, I like the things to be right and in order. I want both parties to feel like they've been represented fairly and equitably. But this has been a bit laborious, and a work session can probably filter through what,
but hindsight is always perfect.
yes. All right. Is there anything else to bring to our attention before we dismiss today?
Nothing other than we have a meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning.
I get this not, right? All right,
Do we have to approve the,
we're gonna make a motion that it will be deferred.
on the assistants as well?
Well, I'm hoping that on our list, we'll go ahead and include them. And I will reach back out to the parties to tell them if there are any assistance. And I will inform the parties where we are today. And if there are any assistance that they would like to add. And we may actually get them this to look at to see if they have any other recommendations.
What is our deadline for these appointments?
we're saying somewhere around the 11th of September, so we can get them in here and get them, we're gonna try to swear in the chief judges and judges and give them their election calendar. And then we've got to get the training on the schedule.
Okay, so,
Is that okay with the board?
That's fine. Can we, will we work this in with one of the meetings we already have scheduled? Do you expect?
You will have anything scheduled after tomorrow, so we'll have to discuss that tomorrow,
Okay.
or whatever y'all think.
okay, so where we are now, we're gonna defer. So we can have a call meeting when we made the phone calls and the other challenges that we need to iron out by getting in contact with people.
Yes,
So can we set perhaps a tentative date?
that's up to the board.
A tentative date, I mean, because I know it's gonna take some time. Okay. What do you think would be, Madam Director, the latest time that would still be able for us to be able to get everything that we need to have in time to have, when the 11th comes, we'll have everything in place? Do you have any kind of idea about that?
Craig, are you looking at a calendar?
Mhm.
What about the 26th? That's a Thursday. I don't know, that's like a week and 2 days, right?
Okay. Well, will someone make a motion that we will reconvene on the chiefs, the judges, and the assistants on the 26th of this month?
What time do you want? I know you said you like earlier better.
The earlier the better, but if not, I'll try and accommodate whatever is best for us.
9 o'clock good?
9 o'clock would be good for me if it's good for everyone else. Could someone please make a motion to that extent?
I'll make a motion that we will meet on August 26th at 9 a.m. to finish up the appointments to the precinct officials.
I'll second it.
It's moved and properly seconded. We will defer finalization of the precinct positions until the 26th at 9 a.m. You heard the question, been properly second. You heard the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So be it. Precious and eternal God, we thank you for being with us today. Oh dear God, sometimes decisions to be made are difficult, but I thank you for the sense and the desire here for us to be in one accord and for us to discuss until we can gain clarity, for you are not the author of confusion. I thank you for all who are here and their attitudes towards trying to come to a right conclusion. This is my prayer, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Meeting is adjourned.
I like that phrase, author of confusion. I've been